Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Taya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Tasya Aradhanam Ihate
Tasya Aradhanam Ihate
Labhate Cha Tatah Kaman
Pate Cha Tatha Kaman
Maeva Vihitan Hitan.
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan
Satasya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Tasyaradhanam ihate
Tasya Aradhanam Ihate
Lavate cha tatah kaman
Labhate Cha Tatha Kaman
Mayeva vihitan hitan.
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Tasyaradhyam Ihite
Tasya Radhanam Ihate
Labhate Cha Tatah Kamam
Teja Tatha Kaman
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktaha
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Tasya Radhanam Ihate
Tasya Radhanam Ihate
Labhate cha Tatah Kaman
Labhate Cha Tatha Kaman
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan.
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan
Tasya Chalama. Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktaha
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktaha
Tasya Radhanamihate
Tasya Radhanam Ihate
Labhate Cha Tatataha
Tatha Kaman
Mayaiva Vihitan Hihitan
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas
Tasyaradhanam ihate
Tasya Radhanam Ihate
Labhate cha tatah kaman
Labhate Cha Tatha Kaman
Mayeva vihitan hitan.
Mayeva Vihitan Hitan. What word meaning? Saha, he, Taya, with that,
With that,
Shraddhaya,
Shraddhaya,
with faith,
with faith,
Yuktaha,
Yuktaha,
endowed,
endowed,
Tasya,
Tasya,
his,
his,
Aradhanam,
Aradhanam,
worship,
worship,
Ihate,
Ihate,
seeks,
seeks,
Labhate,
Labhate,
obtains,
obtains,
Cha,
Cha,
and
and
Tataha,
Tataha,
from which,
from which
Kaman,
Kaman,
desires,
desires,
Maya,
Maya,
by me,
by me,
Eva,
Eva,
alone,
alone,
Vihitan,
Vihitan,
regulated,
regulative,
he,
for,
Tan,
Tan,
those.
those.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Translation. Endowed with such a faith, he seeks favors of a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. Translation with repetition. Endowed with such a faith,
Endowed with such a faith,
he seeks favors
he seeks favors
of a particular demigod
of a particular demigod
and obtains his desires.
and obtains his desires.
But in actuality,
But in actuality,
these benefits
these benefits
are bestowed by me alone.
are bestowed by me alone.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada.
The demigods cannot award benediction to the devotees without the permission of the Supreme Lord. The living entity may forget that everything is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the demigods do not forget. So the worship of demigods and achievement of desired results are not due to the demigods but to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by arrangement. The less intelligent living entity does not know this, and therefore he foolishly goes to the demigods for some benefit. But the pure devotee, when in need of something, prays only to the Supreme Lord. Asking for material benefit, however, is not a sign of a pure devotee. A living entity goes to the demigod usually because he is mad to fulfill his lust. This happens when something undue is desired by the living entity and the Lord himself does not fulfill the desire. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one who worships the Supreme Lord and at the same time desires material enjoyment is contradictory in his desires. Devotional service to the Supreme Lord and the worship of a demigod cannot be on the same platform, because worship of a demigod is material and devotional service to the Supreme Lord is completely spiritual. For the living entity who desires to return to Godhead, material desires are impediments. A pure devotee of the Lord is therefore not awarded the material benefits desired by less intelligent living entities who prefer to worship demigods of the material world rather than engage in devotional service of the Supreme Lord. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we are discussing from the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is known as the knowledge of the Absolute. So, this is a very significant chapter, for Prabhupada mentions that it has got the important aspects about the nature of Krishna consciousness. So, as we all want to achieve the highest perfection, then we need to understand that in a perspective. So people have different ideas of what constitutes the highest perfection, and sometimes people can be misled to think something to be something else and consider something which is not truly the highest to be the highest perfection. And therefore, we need to have a broader perspective to see things. Otherwise, one might be limited by a narrower perspective to think something to be the ultimate. And these set of verses, as we have been seeing in the last couple of verses, so starting from verse number 20, so today we are talking about verse number 22. So starting verse number 20, we have been seeing what it means to worship the demigods, who worships demigods, and how is that their faith is studied, what is the reason for their faith to be studied. And in this verse we see when someone receives benedictions from the demigods, what does it actually mean? So that is what this verse is talking. So let us just briefly go a couple of verses before and see how is this context coming up here. So in verse number 19, Lord Krishna says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudevah Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. So here Vasudeva Sarvamiti. So the Lord as the cause of all cause. Lord Krishna to be the cause of all causes. Sarva Karana Karanam. To know this is very, very rare. And one who knows this is said to be a Mahatma, a great soul. But as it is being said, that when does one achieve this kind of knowledge, that the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna is actually the cause of all causes, and one must surrender unto him. This knowledge comes after many, many births and deaths. So after many, many lives, after a lot of spiritual advancement, one comes to recognize who is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And once one recognizes the supreme position of the Supreme Lord, then one surrenders unto him and renders devotional service. But this is not that we usually see that everyone is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We also see there are so many other kinds of worshippers who worship different people, different demigods, and even impersonal Brahman. So it is important for a devotee to understand what is the position of all these different worshippers. Where do they fall in place? So according to the Vedic scriptures, today people worship anyone and everyone. People worship some movie stars, from politicians, and so on and so forth in their mode of ignorance. So they just try to worship anyone and everyone who is slightly more popular, or either popular in a good sense or a bad sense. People tend to worship them. But this is not according to the Vedic tradition. So according to Vedic tradition, there would be the worshippers of demigods, there would be worshippers of impersonal Brahman, and there would be the personalists who worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Narayana, Vishnu. So it is very important to understand what is the position of the people who are worshipping demigods. So as we saw briefly earlier, demigods are the administrators. So they are taking care of the material facilities which are necessary for functioning of this material world. So the Supreme Lord, who is aloof from this material world, appoints various demigods who take care of the basic material necessities for the maintenance for the material world. So the first, in the verse number 20, we saw that who are those people who actually worship demigods. So kamais taister hitagnanaha, so prapadyante anya devataha. So one whose mind is occupied with material desires. So when one wants some material benedictions, then one does not worship the Supreme Lord, but one tends to worship the demigods and try to gain some material benedictions from them, because their minds are absorbed with material desires. And they worship different demigods based upon the modes of material nature with which they are associated. Someone in the mode of goodness may worship one kind of demigod, one in the mode of passion and ignorance may worship other kinds of demigods, and follow different rules and regulations according to the modes of nature they are associated with. So this is how people worship. This is the reason why people worship demigods. Then very next verse, Lord is saying, where is that this faith that they have in the demigods, where is it coming from? So the Lord is mentioning that tam eva vidadhami aham. So eva vidadhami aham, I am the one who make their faith shraddham achalam. So I am the one who make their faith steady in this in the worship of the demigods, because he, the Supreme Lord, who is present in the heart, he is observing what is that this living entity wants. If the living entity wants to worship, has got some material desires and want to worship a particular kind of demigod, then the Lord, who is present as the super soul, is also guiding, okay, this is what you want, okay, you can go and worship, develop a certain kind of faith and worship a certain kind of demigod. So again we see here that without the mercy of the Lord, one cannot develop any kind of faith. In fact, one cannot function in this material world. And therefore, the Lord, Supreme Lord, is necessary even for one to worship and develop certain faith even in some demigods. And in this verse, we see further that when people have developed certain faith in different demigods, just like when we call people to come to the temple, they will say, no, this day I have this temple I should go for, Thursday for this temple, Wednesday for that temple, Tuesday for some other temple. So they have different demigods. So each day they worship one or the other, and they say, oh, when everything gets over, then maybe someday we'll come here. But in this way, people tend to consider that this demigod worship is the most important thing. And by worshipping them, we are taking care in material sense, we are getting some material profit, and therefore we are happy with this. But in this verse, it is being said that even such favors that one is receiving from the demigods is actually the favor that one is receiving from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mayeva vihitan hitan. So, by me alone. Eva Prabhupada is translating here as alone. So, in fact, whatever one is obtaining, labhate, according to one's desire, one is going and praying to different demigods, and different demigods may offer some benedictions. But again, that prime benedictor of this benediction is the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna himself. And this is what is being explained in this verse, that endowed with such a faith. So this faith, which is given by the Supreme Lord, who is seated as Paramatma in the heart of every living entity, and when the living entity wants to worship a demigod, the Lord is studying that faith. And then once one has developed a certain faith in certain demigod, he starts to seek favors of a particular demigod and obtains his desires. Just like we were mentioning, someone wants a good wife, one may go and worship Uma or Parvati, or someone wants good health, one may worship sun god. For rain, Indra. So in this way, there are different people who worship different demigods, and they obtain a slight favor. Just like yesterday, or day before yesterday, I met a student, and I said, "What will you do when you go to temple?" He said, "I'll pray." Then I asked, "What will you pray?" "I'll pray for something that I can gain some benefit from." So when people think of prayer, when people think of what they should do in front of God, immediately the thing that comes to them is that I should ask some material gain. And by offering prayers, by doing some religiosity, religious activities, I'll get that benefit, and then I develop more faith in the Lord. If that does not come, then I do not develop faith. So basically, the transaction of the faith is happening because of getting something in return. But it is important to note that Srila Prabhupada mentions that this is one of the reasons why there is a decline in religion in the modern world. Because people are equating religiosity or practicing religion with development, with material development, with economic development. So they think that if I'm offering prayers to the Lord, if I'm doing so many things to the Lord, and if I'm not still rich, I'm not still better than others, then what is the point of worshipping? So especially in the country like United States, where there's a lot of material opulences, people think, oh, without praying God, I'm able to get so much money, I'm able to live my life so well, so what is the need to worship God? I can go to good universities, I can work anywhere and make money. So people, when they wrongly equate that worship or religiosity means just to make material gain by worshipping, so that's a misunderstanding of religion. And the other reason is that people think that dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So I do some sort of religious practice so that some benefit I can get in these 4 ways: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So some kind of development, some economic development, some fulfillment of desires, or even liberation, these are all considered to be in the category of material gains. Now, this is what normally people try to achieve. But actually, as we see in Bhagavad Gita, as we go forward, we see what one obtains by worshipping the Supreme Lord. That is very important to recognize. Just like if we, as I also gave this example beforehand, just like we know that there is a tax collector and there is a president. So there is a specific role of the tax collector. So tax collector can do certain things and the president of the country can do certain things. So just because they both are government officials, if you just equate both of them to be same, then we are making a mistake. That I worship the tax collector as good as the president. No. There is a distinction between the tax collector and the president. Similarly, it is important to understand the position and the role of demigods, the different devatas, and the role of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the next verse, we will also see as what kind of benefits one receives when worships one demigods, and how that is different from actually worshipping the Supreme Lord by whom there are different kinds of benefits that one achieves. That is also further described in the coming verses. So here, one important point that to be noted down is that, but in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. So here Prabhupada is starting the purport by saying, the demigods cannot award benediction to the devotees without the permission of the Supreme Lord. So it means that the demigods, the devatas, although they are numerous in numbers, they cannot function independently without the sanction of the Lord, without the permission of the Lord. Just like a living entity cannot function without the sanction of the Lord, the demigods also cannot function without the permission of the Supreme Lord. And similarly, the demigods cannot award benediction to the devotees without the permission of the Lord. So one wonderful example that is from Krishna book. So in Krishna book, we see there are various wonderful pastimes where there are different activities of Lord Krishna are described. And one such example is that of Lord Krishna fights with Banasura. So Banasura is a demon and who worshipped Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is also known as Ashutosha. He is very easily pleased. So he, without caring for what benediction he's asking, because he doesn't want to be bothered by these people who are asking material benedictions, he quickly gives benedictions to them. So Banasura, who worshipped Lord Shiva, was benedicted by Lord Shiva. But as we see in the battle, although between Lord Krishna and Banasura, Lord Shiva himself comes, and he comes with his own sons to fight Lord Krishna. But towards the end, Lord Shiva could not save the life, the killing of Banasura, unless the Lord did not sanction. So it is said here that Prabhupada writes here, the episode of Banasura's fighting with Krishna and later on being saved by the grace of Lord Shiva is confirmation of this statement in the Bhagavad Gita that the worshippers of demigod cannot achieve any benediction without its being sanctioned by the Supreme Lord Krishna. So here, eventually, Lord Shiva has had to pray to Lord Krishna to save the life of Banasura, saying that he is very dear devotee of mine. Please save him. Please don't kill him. So Prabhupada is writing that unless Lord Krishna did not sanction this prayer of Lord Shiva, there was no way to rescue or save Banasura. Here, in this narration, we find that although Banasura was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, when he faced death by Krishna, Lord Shiva was not able to save him. But Lord Shiva appealed to Krishna to save his devotee, and it was thus sanctioned by the Lord. This is the position of Lord Krishna. The exact words used in this connection in the Bhagavad Gita are Mayeva Vihitan Hitan. This means that without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, no demigod can award any benediction to the worshipper. So this is very important to note, that actually it is Supreme Lord who is actually benedicting, who is actually awarding the living entities. Now, that is also through the arrangement of the demigods. So one may worship demigods, but one must also recognize that actually demigods by themselves cannot award any benediction without actually being sanctioned by the Supreme Lord. So this is a wonderful example of how Lord Shiva's prayer was eventually accepted by Lord Krishna, and thus Banasura was saved. So in this way, similarly, we must recognize that behind this material, as we were looking in the morning's class, the immediate cause and the immediate effect. So just like Chanchalpati Prabhu gives the example of a postman coming and giving some money to a student. A student who is in the college, he may be waiting to get his monthly payment earlier. Now these days we have digital payments, but earlier the parents would send some money by money order or some other means, and the postman would come and give that money order to the student. Now the immediate cause, the immediate the one who is giving that benefit appearingly appears to be the postman who is actually giving the money, but actually he is just a carrier. The actual money is being given by the parents of the student. Similarly, so-called apparently we may see that some demigods are benedicting something by the offering of prayer. But one must also realize that without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, that benediction what one is receiving is not actually the direct cause, is not the ultimate cause, is not the real cause. The real cause is the Supreme Lord. So this understanding of the Lord's, the factor of Daiva is very important in life. Prabhupada mentions in various places that people are making millions and millions of plans. Not all plans are successful. Why? Although people are making great arrangements by machineries, by different tools and mechanisms, and different ways people are thinking that I can make economic development, I can make everything possible simply by my endeavors. But Prabhupada says, no, it is not possible without the mercy or the sanction of the Supreme Lord, the Daiva. Therefore, the devotees of the Lord, whenever they're performing an activity, whenever they're doing anything, they always keep in mind the factor of Daiva, the Supreme Lord. And they always realize that if the Lord does not sanction, then it is not possible. And therefore, they are always dependent upon the sanction of the Lord. They always seek the permission of the Lord before they do things, and they always depend upon the sanction of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada used to say that his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, when someone used to ask, are you going to Vrindavan? Then he would say, if Lord permits, or if Lord sanctions, then I will go to Vrindavan. So he would never say, I will do this, I will do that. No. He would always say that if Lord sanctions, or if Lord permits, then I will be doing this. So basically, that idea that without the factor of Daiva, actually things do not move. We may see some immediate cause and immediate effect, immediate reasons of things moving, but actually at the essence of all these things is the factor of the Lord, is the sanction of the Lord. And therefore, as we were looking in today's morning class also, where the bull and the cow who were punished by Kali, Purusha, Kali personified, they did not try to identify the cause for the suffering, because at the root they recognized that without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, it is not possible for them to undergo this. And why do we not recognize this? As in the case of the bull and the cow, it is mentioned in the chapter that they were put into a certain doubtfulness about this. The reason for that doubtfulness, as Prabhu also brought in the morning, Gunamayi, that the modes of material nature, when one is afflicted with the modes of material nature, when one is not in the spiritual platform, then these doubts come in of the importance or the presence of the Supreme Lord as the important factor in all aspects of the activities and the movement of this world, in our lives, in all spheres of life. So we forget the presence of the Lord. We forget the sanction of the Lord. We see the material cause and effect. Our own endeavors are the only means to attain things. So in this way, we mistaken the role of the Supreme Lord. So as we can see here, that people who do not understand the role of the Supreme Lord, then they start to worship someone else. And in this way, they settle for something which is not the highest. And then Prabhupada is mentioning another important point, is that living entity may forget that everything is the property of the Supreme Lord. But the demigods do not forget. So this is a very important point. Srila Prabhupada used to always bring this in various conversations. Maybe I'll try to find a conversation where Srila Prabhupada is explaining this to a Australian lawyer. So in this conversation, so basically the devotees in Australia, they were celebrating Rath Yatra festival, and it so happened that they stole some flowers. So they stole so many flowers that the farmer complaint to the police and saying that they should be fined. Then this issue comes and this lawyer helps them, helps the devotees, and then Prabhupada talks about this principle of how the Lord is supreme proprietor. It's a very interesting conversation. So I will just, it's a quite lengthy one. Let me just one. So this is described by Kurma Prabhu. He was in Australia temple, and he's mentioning here that so here there are few people who have come to visit Prabhupada in Melbourne temple, and Raymond Lopez, a prominent Melbourne criminal barrister, Wally Strauss, a solicitor, had both defended the devotees in many legal cases. So they always come to help. So basically in Australia, devotees used to face a lot of troubles because of police. So whenever they used to do kirtans or they used to do some activities, the police used to chase away from that place. So in order to tackle this, they eventually found a way out. They decided that they will buy a bus. They bought a bus and they would travel city to city. So by the time the police comes at place, they have already moved to another place. So they were always running like this. And in this way, the police also became very agitated. And whenever they used to find a way, they would try to put some case or trouble, arrest some devotees and things like that. So this barristers, Raymond Lopez and Wally Strauss, they used to help devotees. So the night before the Rath Yatra chariot festival, devotees stole a whole house full of carnations to decorate the Rath Yatra carts. And somehow Raymond successfully defended the devotees, avoiding prosecution. So Prabhupada smiled and proceeded to tell an amusing story. So Prabhupada smiled hearing this. So Prabhupada shares a story. There was a great devotee in South India who stole money from the treasury of the Mohammedan king and constructed a very nice temple. Later on, he was caught by the king, the Nawab, and put into jail. That night, two beautiful boys came to the Nawab in a dream. One of them spoke to him, "Whatever money he has taken, you can take from me, but please release him." The Nawab replied in the dream, "If I get my money back, I will release him." The Nawab's dream broke, and he saw on the floor all the money, but the room was empty. Then he could immediately understand that he had wrongly imprisoned a great devotee. He immediately had the devotee brought to the palace. "You are released. Whatever you have already taken, that's all right. Please take all this money and spend it as you like." So this is a story that Srila Prabhupada is narrating about this great devotee, as how the Lord himself has come to rescue his devotee when that devotee builds something for the Lord. And then Prabhupada goes on to, so whenever Prabhupada's conversations are very insightful, for they bring always a philosophical point. They always bring the essence behind that incident. So here the incidents of this stealing of carnations and the lawyers saving them, but then Prabhupada is immediately going to bring in a very important point. Prabhupada continued, "So devotees sometimes do like that. Actually, nothing is private property. That is our philosophy. Isha vasyam idam sarvam. Everything belongs to God. That's a fact. Under the influence of Maya, we are thinking that this is my property. Prabhupada pointed to the blue chaise lounge on which he sat. Just like suppose this cushion, where from the wood has come? Has somebody produced wood? Who has produced? It is God's property. Rather, we have stolen God's property and claiming my property. So, just like someone, Prabhupada will further go on to explain this point very nicely. So, this is a very important point Prabhupada brings again and again in his conversations, in his lectures, while meeting especially world leaders and other important people, that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And where is actually the thing is coming from? No one is able to make wood out of nowhere. It's by the mercy of the Lord that we have beautiful trees, and as a carpenter one may make use of the wood in a different way and make a certain kind of a chair or a table, but fundamentally the thing that we are having is actually the property of the Lord. It's coming from because of the mercy of the Lord. Then Australia, the Englishman came here, but is that the property of the Englishman? It was there. America was there. And when everything will be finished, it will still be there. In the middle we come and claim it is my property and fight. Is it not? So Prabhupada is posing a question and smiling at Raymond. You are a barrister. You can judge better. Raymond and the others laughed. Originally, Prabhupada continues, everything belongs to God. So why are we claiming it is my property? Suppose you have come here, you sit down for 1 hour, 2 hours, and if you claim it is my property, is that very good judgment? So Prabhupada is giving a very simple example, that someone is coming and sitting in the chair and claiming that because I am sitting here for 2 hours, it belongs to me. You have come from outside, you are allowed to sit down here for 2 hours, and if you claim this is my property, similarly we come here, we take birth either in America or in Australia or in India and remain for 50, 60 or 100 years. Why shall I claim it is my property? So this is one of the illusions that everyone has got, that I am the owner of things in this material world. Because I am the owner, I am the enjoyer. So this is a deep-rooted conception that people are carrying all over the world. And because of this, people fight for so many very insignificant things. Although people can be within the same family, just because they think this is my property, no, this is my property. Why did you take so much property? Give me this much property. So not understanding that actually everything belongs to the Lord, people are fighting for things which they do not actually own and try to enjoy things which they are not actually meant to be enjoyed by them. So here Raymond, he brings in a practical point. He says, Raymond suggested that it would be reasonable to argue that if we own some property, we could claim possession of it. Prabhupada agreed, but added, for a time you have got possession of the chair, that does not mean your property. So Raymond, being a lawyer, he's thinking in practical terms. Right now I'm owning this book, so I'm the owner. But Prabhupada is saying, just because you are possessing this does not mean that it is your property. Raymond, applying his legal logic, continued, but I suppose if somebody came and took the chair while I've got it in my possession, I would be terribly upset about it. Prabhupada stuck to the original point. No, that is another thing. Nobody will disturb you. You remain in your chair. That does not mean that because you have sat down on this chair for 2 hours, you become proprietor. So Prabhupada is again and again bringing this one single point, that nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to the Lord. Vali, the solicitor, spoke out jokingly. One gets attached to the chair. I like the chair. It's a nice chair. No, that's all right, Prabhupada continued. You like, you sit down and you go when it is finished. But how do you claim that it is your property? Yes, someone may develop certain attachment. Oh, I've stayed in this house for so long. I've bought this car for so long. I've got this from my parents. I've got this from my friend. I value this possession, but nothing belongs to us. So how can you claim that this is your property? Prabhupada gave the Krishna conscious perspective. The conclusion is, it is God's property. God has given us to live. Let us thank God, feel obliged to Him, and glorify Him. That is our vision. That is the Krishna consciousness movement. You accept the real position that nothing belongs to you, everything belongs to God. You also belong to God. Your body, yourself, everything belongs to God. This body is material body. That material energy, earth, water, fire, air, everything belongs to God. The sea belongs to God. Water, vast water, you are not created. Neither your forefather has created. So this body is made up of earth, water, air, fire, ether, 5 elements. So your body is also God's. So far I am soul, I am also part and parcel of God. So everything belongs to God. This is Krishna consciousness. So this is a very important transformation that is required. As long as we do not recognize the ownership, the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, we tend to artificially claim proprietorship over what is not, which does not belong to us, and fight unnecessarily over this so-called chair or house that we have acquired in this temporary sojourn in our material life. So Prabhupada further continues, then I'll just touch upon one more point. Madhudisa spoke up. Srila Prabhupada, this concept that everything belongs to God, it can't work unless everybody believes that everything belongs to God. So sometimes people may say, okay, that's all right, that's a good point, but someone may come and steal my house, someone may do something else. So how does it practically work? Then everybody may be mad, retorted Prabhupada with a grin. That does not change the fact. If some madman comes in this room and he fights, I am the proprietor, you get out. So that is not the fact. Valley was trying to grasp Prabhupada's point. I understand, you know, you were talking about the sea and so on, but it's for people to use. Use, you can use, Prabhupada said. Tena tektena bhunjita. That is the Vedic injunction. What is given to you, you use it. Just like one gentleman has got 5 sons. He gives one son, this is your property, this you can use. But the sons must acknowledge that this is father's property, he has given us. Similarly, in the Vedic Shastra, it is said that everything belongs to God, and whatever he has given to you, you can use. Don't encroach upon others. So Prabhupada was further giving instructions on how this principle can be used by different nations, in fact even by United Nations. And then Prabhupada says how so-called problems which people are not able to solve by different methods, institutions, and so-called planning can be easily resolved. Prabhupada gives a practical example, just like there is no food grains in one country, the other countries, when they come in this consciousness that everything belongs to the Lord, just like each son has got some property, but eventually it all belongs to the Lord. So as soon as one recognizes that, then there is peace and prosperity, then people can share amongst themselves, the so-called unwanted fightings will go away, and the real united nation, the real united world can take place. Without this consciousness, Prabhupada goes on further to state that it is not possible to actually gain peace and prosperity. So this principle that actually the Lord is a proprietor is a very important principle, and as Prabhupada also mentions in the very beginning, that it is only because of illusion, it's because of because one is influenced by the modes of material nature that one is unable to see this, that who is the actual proprietor of the everything that exists in the creation. So this is another important point that Srila Prabhupada is very early in the purport, Prabhupada is bringing this. Then Prabhupada goes on to say, what does a pure devotee of the Lord do? The pure devotee of the Lord, even if he So people who are engrossed with material desires to fulfill their own senses, they approach a demigod, asking for some material gain. But that is very different from what a pure devotee does. A pure devotee is nishkinchanana. He's not endeavoring for anything which is materially. He's not trying to gain anything material. He rather is happy by being freed from this material possessions, and he's never hankering for any of these material benefits. In fact, a pure devotee is one, as it is mentioned here, that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it is said that one who worships the Supreme Lord and at the same time desires material enjoyment is contradictory in his desires. So this is one of the characteristics by which one can see a pure devotee of the Lord. A pure devotee's desires, his activities will not be contaminated with the tinge of material desires. Just like today we see sometimes in the temples we have many deities of the Lord. So they think that worshipping all the gods is equal. There is no difference. In fact, by having 10, 20, 30 more gods, more benefit. Just like in a mall, they think big mall, more shops, more money. So people are also thinking that, okay, there can be multiple gods, I can accommodate as many as possible in the temple, and they are all same, and by which we can make some material benefit. But actually, according to Shastras, it is not the same. The worship of the Lord Vishnu, Krishna, is of complete different nature, because the Lord is all spiritual. The benedictions that is given by the Lord is for the ultimate benefit. The Supreme Lord can also benedict material benefits. And as we see here, Prabhupada writes, even if a pure devotee wants something, he only goes and approaches the Supreme Lord. But actually, a pure devotee is not want of anything, because the characteristic of a pure devotee and pure devotion is that the pure devotee is satisfied only in the service of the Lord. His only desire is to serve the Lord. That is the definition of a pure devotee. Lord Kapila Deva, when instructing Mother Devahoti, gives this characteristics of pure devotion and a pure devotee. A pure devotee is one who desires only devotional service to the Lord. There is no other desire. So this is a very important principle to keep in mind. Otherwise, we may be confused to think that all worship is same. Asking material benefits in the name of offering prayers is equally good as worshipping devotional service. No. There is a characteristic difference between these two. And devotional service of the Supreme Lord and the worship of a demigod cannot be on the same platform, because worship of a demigod is material and devotional service of the Supreme Lord is completely spiritual. This is a very important point that Srila Prabhupada was very particular, and so are the Gaudiya Vaishnava Acharyas, that to consider that the worship of Radha Krishna and the worship of other demigods to be equal is an offense. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada has been very careful when he has introduced worship in the temples. When devotees ask, can we do this, can we do that, Prabhupada was very careful that the position of Radha Krishna worship is very high. It is not to be contaminated with anything. And therefore, we see that ISKCON temples, it's very strict that they only worship Radha and Krishna, or Shri Shri Gaur Nitai, Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadramaya. So they worship the Lord Krishna or his incarnations. So this is very important point, not to misunderstand that worshipping any demigods is same as worshipping the Supreme Lord. So while the demigods can give material benefits, actually Harim Vina Mritim Na Taranti. So without the mercy of Lord Hari, one cannot cross over this material world. Even the demigods are part of this material world. Therefore, how can they benedict anyone to cross over this material existence? And therefore, on the other hand, the Supreme Lord, who is part of the spiritual world, he is the one by whose benediction one can actually cross over this material existence and overcome all the sufferings of life. What is the gain of asking a temporary solution when there is another problem awaiting for us? Rather, an intelligent man makes a choice to avoid all the problems. All the problems means Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. So, one who recognizes that I want to stop all the fundamental problems of life. And for that, the only shelter is the Supreme Lord Hari. So by taking the shelter of the Supreme Lord, one can make a solution to all the problems, and actually he is the one who gives benedictions of all kinds, and especially the most important benediction of spiritual perfection. And therefore, it is important that Prabhupada is mentioning here that one who desires to return to Godhead, that means one who has a broader perspective. Broader perspective means to achieve the highest perfection, to go back to the spiritual world. Material desires are impediments. A pure devotee of the Lord is therefore not awarded the material benefits desired by less intelligent living entities who prefer to worship demigods of the material world rather than engage in devotional service of the Supreme Lord. So sometimes it may appear that the pure devotees of the Lord are not so materially opulent. But when we see opulence, there is one idea of opulence that is of material wealth. But there is another opulence that a devotee carries, that is spiritual opulence. Sometimes we fail to recognize the spiritual opulence of the devotee. Just like Sudama was such a great devotee. Materially he may appear to not have something, but he was carrying something very, very great spiritual opulence. That his faith in the Lord, his desire to serve the Lord. So when one is spiritually opulent, the material opulence naturally follows, if the Lord wants to give. In any case, the devotee is always happy by simply carrying the devotional service to the Lord. And for those pure devotees to ask for any material impediments is insignificant. In fact, they consider it to be troublesome. So therefore, one must guard against asking for material desires and recognize the position of the demigods, the importance of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While doing this, it is important to also note that just because the devotees, Vaishnavas, worship Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, it does not mean that they disregard demigods. It's just that they recognize what is the position of demigods and give them their due respects. And in this way, by worshipping the Supreme Lord, even the demigods are actually pleased. That we will see as we go further. But I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you. I was just scrolling through the previous slokam where Lord is saying that if the people who are praying to these devas, right, he is yo yo yam tanum bhaktah shraddhayarchittum ichhati tasya chalam shraddham tameva vidhamyaham. So I come through for them through those devas. Is that what saying? But
can you say the last?
No, but he's saying that though they worship somebody else, but they actually worshipping me, right? So he's not kind of completely dismissing that they should not worship those demigods. Is that right way I'm understanding?
Prabhupada says in the last verse, the faith that they're developing to worship a particular demigod, that is coming because of the Supreme Lord himself. So the idea that even if one is doing worship of demigod, the role of the Lord is always present. Without the presence of the Lord, one cannot even develop the faith to worship the demigods. So Lord is not saying that worshipping them is worshipping me here, but here the Lord is saying that the faith that you are developing to even worship any of the particular demigods is also coming from me. If there are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Grantara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Thank you all for joining. Hare Krishna.